The restaurant was the kind of place where people came to see and be seen. Warm lighting, expensive wine glasses, waiters who moved like ghosts between tables. I sat across from my parents at a corner booth, and everything about the moment felt staged. My mother was waving her hand dramatically as she spoke to the waiter. "Our daughter is the artist everyone's talking about," she was saying with pride dripping from every word. "She's had her work featured in national exhibitions. We're so proud of her." My father raised his champagne glass and smiled like we were one big happy family. "To Tessa," he announced, "who we always knew would make it big." I forced myself to smile and raise my glass. Inside I was screaming. These were the same people who had thrown me out of their house for refusing to go to law school. These were the same people who had called me a failure and an embarrassment. Now they were sitting in front of me, trying to take credit for my success like they had never abandoned me at all. "My name is Tessa Cole, and I want you to understand something from the very beginning. This isn't a story about parents who made mistakes and learned from them. This isn't a heartwarming tale about reconciliation and forgiveness. This is a story about what happens when people who hurt you try to rewrite history and pretend they were never the villains." When I was 18 years old, I had just been accepted to the Academy of Visual Arts, one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. It was my dream. I had wanted to be an artist since I was a little girl. I spent my entire childhood drawing, painting, sketching everything I saw around me. Art was the only language that made sense to me. But my parents were attorneys. They lived in a world of logic and practicality. To them, art wasn't a career. It was a hobby for people who didn't have the discipline to do anything else. I remember running into the living room on the day I got my acceptance letter. I was jumping up and down, waving the envelope in the air. "I got in!" I screamed. "I got into the academy. Can you believe it? This is the best day of my life." My mother was reading a book. She lowered it slowly and looked at me. Her smile faded. My father put down his newspaper and stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. It looked like disappointment mixed with anger. "You mean instead of law school?" my father asked quietly. The room went silent. I knew in that moment that something terrible was about to happen. He nodded. "I was accepted to the academy," I repeated. "I thought they would be happy for me. I thought they would celebrate with me." Instead, my father stood up and walked to the window. That evening at dinner, the conversation became an interrogation. My mother slid a brochure across the table toward me. It was about a prestigious law school program. "Be sensible," she said. Her voice was calm but cold. "You have the grades to get into law school. You could have a real career, a real future." Push the brochure back. "I already chose," I said. "I'm going to the academy." My father slammed his fist on the table so hard that water splashed out of the glasses. "Then you can pay your own way," he announced. "And don't expect us to help you. You're making a mistake, and you're going to have to live with the consequences." My mother started crying. Not sad crying. Disappointed crying. The kind of crying that made me feel like I had personally wounded her by having dreams she didn't approve of. That night, I lay in my bed listening to them argue downstairs about me. I could hear my father saying things like ungrateful and throwing her life away. I could hear my mother saying things like she needs to learn, and she won't make it without us. 2 weeks later, I packed a suitcase with everything I could fit. My clothes, my sketchbooks, my colored pencils, my hope. My mother followed me to the front door. "You'll come crawling back," she said. She said it like it was a prediction. Like she knew something about me that I didn't know about myself. She said it like coming home would be inevitable. I turned to face her, and I said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "You'll be waiting a long time," I told her. My father didn't come to say goodbye. He just watched from the study as I left. I walked out of that house into the rain, and I didn't look back. I told myself I would never look back. I told myself that I didn't need them. I told myself that I could do this on my own. The first years were brutal in ways I didn't expect. I moved into a basement apartment that I shared with 2 roommates who worked at coffee shops. The apartment was cold and damp, and it smelled like mold no matter how much we cleaned it. I worked nights at a diner, taking orders and pouring coffee, and I painted during the day when I wasn't sleeping. I created art on cardboard scraps because I couldn't afford canvas. I used cheap acrylic paint that barely had any pigment. I painted on the walls of my bedroom because I had nowhere else to create. Exhaustion became my normal state. I was tired all the time. My hands were perpetually stained with paint. My clothes always smelled like coffee and grease from the diner. But there was also a strange kind of freedom in it. Nobody was telling me what to do. Nobody was disappointed in me because they had never believed in me in the first place. I had nothing to lose because I had already lost everything. I was working at the diner when my opportunity came. I had started taping my sketches to the wall near the register. They were small drawings, nothing fancy, just something to make the space feel less depressing. One day, a customer named Vincent came in for his usual coffee. He noticed my sketches and asked if I had drawn them. When I said yes, he asked if I would be interested in meeting someone he knew who owned a small gallery. I didn't think anything would come of it. I had learned not to get my hopes up. But I went to the meeting anyway. The gallery owner's name was Marcus, and he was probably in his 60s. He looked at my sketches for a long time without saying anything. I felt certain he was going to tell me they weren't good enough, that I was wasting his time, that I should find a real job and stop pretending to be an artist. Instead, he looked at me and said, "I want to give you a show." It was a small show. 10 paintings. 10 people showed up for the opening. But one of those people bought a painting for $900. I remember staring at the check in disbelief. I had never had that much money in my life. I called my old friend from high school and cried on the phone. "I'm not crazy," I kept saying. "I'm not crazy. Somebody believed in me." A local newspaper did a feature on me a few months after my first gallery show. The headline read, "Young Artist Captures Resilience on Canvas." I cut out the article and taped it to my refrigerator. I stared at it every morning. Then, about a week after the article came out, I saw a comment online. Someone had written, "She looks like Thomas and Victor Cole's daughter." My stomach dropped. My parents' names are Thomas and Victor Cole. I realized that they had probably seen the article. They probably knew that I was succeeding. And they hadn't contacted me. Some part of me wondered if they were proud of me. Some part of me wondered if they had regretted throwing me out. But I didn't reach out to them. I wasn't ready. I was still too angry. About a week after the comment, I received an email from my mother's address. "Saw your article," the email said. "So proud of you. Dinner soon." I stared at that email for hours. I read it over and over again, trying to understand what it meant. Was she sincere? Was she just trying to re-establish a relationship? Was she trying to apologize? I didn't know. And I didn't want to know. I deleted the email and didn't respond. I wasn't ready to see them. I wasn't ready to hear their explanations or their justifications. I needed to focus on my work. I needed to prove to myself that I could make it without them. Over the next few years, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. I upgraded my workspace to a small studio apartment. I quit the diner and took freelance work instead so I had more time to paint. I created a signature style. My paintings were bold and emotional. They told stories about struggle and survival and hope. Every canvas I created, I signed my name in huge, confident letters. Tessa Cole. Not the daughter of Thomas and Victor Cole. Just Tessa. Just me. Critics started to notice my work. Collectors started to seek me out. I was getting commissions from corporations and private collectors. I was making real money. And through it all, my parents tried to contact me occasionally, but I kept my distance. 5 years after I left home, I got a call that changed everything. A curator at a major museum called me. She said they wanted to feature my entire collection in an exhibition called Modern Spirit. It was the validation I had been working toward my entire career. My name would be associated with one of the most prestigious museums in the country. I remember dropping my paintbrush when she told me. I remember my hands shaking. I remember crying tears of joy and relief and vindication. This was proof. This was absolute proof that my parents had been wrong about me. I had made it. The exhibition was a huge success. A video clip of me speaking about my journey went viral online. In the video, I talked about finding family in art. I talked about creating when nobody believed in me. The clip had millions of views. News outlets started picking up my story. Suddenly, I was everywhere. And my parents saw all of it. They watched me become successful without them. They watched me from the outside. Then they called again. This time I answered. We met at a cafe. My mother hugged me too long, like she was trying to squeeze years of missed time into a single embrace. You look wonderful, she said. My father smiled and told me how proud he was. We always knew you'd land on your feet, he said. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to remind him that he had cut me off. That he had told me I was making a mistake. That he had refused to support my dreams. But I just smiled politely and listened to them talk about my success like they had played some role in it. Like they hadn't almost destroyed me. A few weeks later, my parents approached me with an idea. They wanted to start a foundation together. A foundation for the arts. They wanted to call it the Cole Family Foundation. And they wanted my name attached to it. They painted this beautiful picture of how it would show family unity. How it would inspire young artists. My mother's eyes were bright with excitement. She truly believed that this was a wonderful idea. My father nodded along. They thought this was how we would reconcile. They thought this was how they could make up for throwing me out. But what they were really doing was trying to capitalize on my success. They wanted to use my name and my reputation to build something for themselves. I went home that night and had a complete breakdown. I stood in front of my blank canvas and let all the rage I had been holding back pour out of me. I cried so hard I could barely breathe. I thought about every cold night I spent in that basement apartment. I thought about every meal I skipped because I didn't have enough money. I thought about the loneliness of creating in isolation while my parents pretended I didn't exist. I thought about how easy it would have been to quit. How many times I had almost given up. When I finally stopped crying, I wiped my face and whispered to myself, if they want my name, they're going to get exactly what they deserve. I started planning. I told my parents that I would work with them on the foundation. They were thrilled. But while they thought we were building something together, I was secretly building something else. I created a non-profit organization called the Second Chance Initiative. The mission was to provide funding and support for young artists who had been abandoned or rejected by their families. The organization would operate under my name. The logo was a phoenix rising from ashes. I registered everything quietly. I didn't tell my parents anything. I just smiled and took notes while they talked about their vision for the Cole Family Foundation. As I continued to build the Second Chance Initiative, my public profile kept growing. I did media interviews where I carefully crafted my narrative. I built this alone, I kept saying. I didn't have help. I didn't have support. I just had my art and my determination. Every time I said these words, I could feel my parents tightening up beside me. Their smiles became less genuine. Their pride started to look more like desperation. They were realizing that the narrative I was building didn't include them. They were becoming invisible in the story of my success, which was exactly what I wanted. A documentary filmmaker reached out to me about making a film about my journey. The concept was about independence and overcoming adversity. It was about building yourself from nothing. My parents insisted on being involved in the filming. They wanted to tell their side of the story. I agreed to include them. But I was very careful about what they would say on camera. Coached them. I set them up. I made sure that their own words would eventually betray them. I didn't cut them down. I didn't argue with them. I just let them speak. And I knew that when the documentary was released, their words would reveal exactly who they were. The big launch event finally arrived. My parents had organized a grand ballroom event for what they still thought was going to be called the Cole Family Foundation. There were cameras everywhere. There were important people from the art world, from the business world, from the media. My parents stood on stage beside a huge banner that read, The Cole Family Foundation. They looked so proud. They looked so ready to finally be associated with my success. And then I walked out onto the stage. I tapped the microphone and the room went silent. I made a change to the foundation's name, I announced. The room was still quiet. Then, behind me, a new banner slowly dropped. It read, "The Second Chance Initiative." Underneath was the Phoenix logo. The room erupted in applause. I could see the confusion on my parents' faces. I could see my mother's smile fading. My father's pride transforming into something else. Horror maybe. Or realization. I continued speaking. This foundation is dedicated to every young artist who was told they weren't good enough. To every young person who was rejected by their family for following their passion. This is for everyone who had to build themselves from absolutely nothing. This is for people like me. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, journalists had connected all the dots. Headlines started appearing. Artist establishes foundation for young people rejected by families, inspired by personal story. Second Chance Initiative launches to support abandoned artists. People started asking questions. Did she get rejected by her family? Why did she start this foundation? The story came out. My story came out. Everyone in my parents' social circle learned that they had thrown me out of the house. Everyone learned that they had refused to support my dreams. Everyone learned that while they were attending fancy dinners and talking about their important jobs, their daughter was sleeping in a basement apartment and painting on cardboard. My parents came to my studio unannounced a few days after the foundation launch. My father looked angry. My mother looked hurt. They stood in my studio surrounded by paintings and demanded an explanation. "You humiliated us," my father said. "You made us look like monsters in front of our entire community." I looked at him calmly and said, "No, I just told the truth. You made yourselves look like monsters by actually being monsters." My mother started crying. "We just wanted to be part of your life," she said. I turned away from both of them. "You were part of my life," I said quietly. "You're the cautionary tale. You're what I paint about. You're the reason the Second Chance Initiative exists. You taught me what rejection feels like, and I turned it into art." A few weeks later, I completed my final painting for an upcoming exhibition. It was called "The Door That Closed." In the painting, a single figure walks away from a beautiful, glowing house. The figure is leaving. The house is behind them, already fading into the background. Critics called it my masterpiece. They said it captured something profound about independence and moving forward. I stood in front of that painting during the exhibition opening, surrounded by people who loved my work, and I felt completely at peace. There were no cameras flashing at my parents. There were no smiles between us. There was just me and my art and the life I had built by myself. Late one night, alone in my studio, I sat and thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the 18-year-old girl who was brave enough to follow her passion despite her parents' disapproval. I thought about the years of struggle and loneliness. I thought about the moment I realized I didn't need their approval to be successful. I thought about how I had taken the pain they caused me and transformed it into something meaningful. Something that helped other people. I picked up my sketchbook and began to draw. I drew without thinking. I drew the future I was creating. A future that belonged completely to me. In the quiet of my studio, I whispered to myself, "They cut me off for following my passion. Then they tried to own my success. But you can't own someone's self-worth. You can't buy independence. You can't take credit for someone else's survival. I lost a family, but I found myself. That's the best trade I ever made."